I give away free Steam games with every major video I do, and here's who won this week. The games available to receive are listed below. To enter, just leave a comment and have contact information on your profile. And now, on with the video. I'm playing something almost every week, and sometimes I want to talk about it and give you a vertical slice. So stick with me for some lightning reviews. This week, on the chopping block. This week, first and foremost, I hope you have a happy Halloween, and second of all, I've been playing Don't Scream. Wanting to stick with the season just beyond my Cult of the Lamb review, I decided to dive into a horror game that caught my interest. I was contemplating doing the Dread X collection, featuring more work from my favorite solo boomer shooter dev, Mr. Szymanski, but I figured I want to keep things a little bit more varied, plus I don't want to come across like I am obsessing over the man whose house I'm currently camped outside of. That being said, I saw a title that garnered some interest off the concept and unique control gimmick it brought to the table. Don't Scream by Jor and Joe and Dog is rather straightforward in its marketing pitch to the Steam store page. If you scream, you restart. If done correctly, it could be an incredibly novel idea. When immersed in a horrific environment or game, one can often lose track of themselves and their composure, and a release of tension in the form of a scare and interjectory scream could add for an interesting twist to the traditional survival horror formula. Now, at the time of review, this game is brand new on the storefront and is clearly advertised as an early access release. As such, the developers openly admit that there are many parts of the game that they are intending to address, such as expanding the lore, fixing bugs, optimizing the game, and making more dynamic gameplay. Item 1 on page 1 of my recommendations would be, of course, to make the controls customizable. I didn't notice any technical bugs, or at least I don't think I did, but that could have been disguised by the gameplay's graphical style. When you start playing, you see the game through an old VHS-style camcorder lens. It drew me in pretty quickly and reminded me of things like the old Blair Witch or Paranormal Activity movies. The environment you start off exploring is racially detailed and impressive in spite of, or indeed possibly because of, the filter you're seeing it through. The lush greenery and fine detail makes for a believable environment. You also see a timer in the corner that only counts down so long as your character is moving, so the game is set to last approximately 18 minutes. I frequently took breaks to stop moving and look around my environment, so my playthrough ended up being about 25 minutes to half an hour. But I digress. Things quickly take a turn though, because on my playthrough I followed the wreckage of a plane crash and was greeted with an abandoned vending machine seemingly placed underneath some strung up bodies. Then things turn supernatural, night sets in jarringly quickly, and things start making noises from the shadows. Experiencing a few mild jump scares, I continued exploring until I came to a decrepit mini-mart in the middle of the forest. Indeed, I would have been a little bit more nervous in my exploration had I not been suspecting something that I inevitably had confirmed in that same mini-mart. Making my way past bodies and cast-aside merchandise, I stumbled across a restroom in the back of the store, and huddled in the corner I saw a monster feasting on the remains of another member of my fellow man. Slowly, I turned to the door to close it, only to have the monster suddenly appear in front of camera and then disappear entirely, and that's when the illusion broke. The biggest problem with Don't Scream is that it's leaning on its eponymous gimmick so heavily that in my case it becomes a crutch that can't support the game's weight. As I've stated in the past, I'm something of a first responder in my personal professional life, and that by and large makes me possibly one of the worst individuals for this game to try and scare. I've seen blood, gore, fights, grievous injury, and at least one family ripped apart from this mortal realm in real time, so it can almost go without saying that I've acquired the skills to maintain my composure, monitor my appearance, and manage my panic responses. With that in mind, imagine how low of a bar has to be set for an individual who is specifically trained to minimize their own reactions not to scream. I could have tweaked the microphone sensitivity to pick up almost anything, but at that point I'd have to start being careful about ambient noises or my cat's roughhousing in my proximity and potentially giving me a cheap game over state. I also don't think it would have ultimately mattered since I'm not certain I made any audible reaction noises during my playthrough anyways. I did get bored and started talking to myself in hushed tones, and towards the end of my playthrough I was singing stupid songs in that same tone, but that should be a good indicator of how much the game had let go of me as far as tension or immersion. Going back to that gas station segment, this was where I realized that the Don't Scream directive was the only string to the game's bow, and there was literally no other failure state so long as I could keep my wits about me. Realizing that the only thing the game had left over was cheap attempts to startle me, all that was really left was to keep moving until a timer in the corner counted down to 0. By the time that epiphany had thoroughly set in, I was actively looking around the woods for anything different, and I feel like gallivanting towards a headless corpse crying for help or a troop of giant spiders in order to relieve boredom is entirely opposite to the game's intention. In my humble opinion, if this game wants to succeed beyond a gimmick suitable to target streamers looking for something to overreact to, or people looking to torture their overly panicky friends, then it needs to look to other survival horror titles and actually become more of a game rather than a walking simulator with imagery that will put people off their lunch. I know that the developer said they're working on incorporating more dynamic scares, but the gameplay overall needs to be more dynamic. Either some manner of combat and health management, or a hiding mechanic akin to Alien Isolation or Outlast would go a long way to filling the gaps needed to make this thing more engaging. The instruction to not scream and tying it back to the game's failure state is a novel idea, but in its current iteration it's little more than a single piece to a formula that has yet to be realized. Finally, I know the developers said that lore was another thing that they were expanding, but in the game's current state it seems to be little more than a mishmashing of disparate elements cobbled together in a small sandbox with a mechanic that can't stand up to the gameplay it's trying to encourage. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to try to find something actually scary to play. Hey, look at that, it's the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember that commenting can actually win you a free prize. So until next time, this is Gheeotine saying thanks for watching and keep your head on your shoulders.